The 7-year-old boy clutched a glass jar filled with crumpled dollar bills and coins, then walked up to a complete stranger and placed it in her trembling hands. Sarah Mitchell had been sitting on that park bench for 3 hours, staring at the eviction notice in her lap, when the small figure approached her with determination that seemed too mature for his tiny frame. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty playground, and she hadn't even noticed the child until he stood directly in front of her, holding out his entire life savings, $43.27 in a mason jar labeled "for my bike" in careful crayon letters. What happened next would not only change both their lives, forever, but would reveal a connection that had been waiting 7 years to complete its circle. Sarah had once been the woman who had everything figured out, a successful real estate agent, loving mother, devoted wife, until the accident took her husband and her ability to work in one terrible night. The traumatic brain injury from the crash had stolen her short-term memory, making it impossible to maintain her career. Her daughter Emma, now 14, had become more of a caretaker than a teenager, and the weight of that guilt pressed on Sarah's chest every single day. The insurance money had run out 6 months ago. Her disability claim had been denied twice, and now they had 72 hours to leave the only home Emma had ever known. She came to this park because it was where she used to bring Emma as a toddler, back when pushing her on the swings was her biggest worry. Now, at 42, Sarah felt like she was drowning in broad daylight, invisible to a world that had moved on without her. She had no idea that the universe had sent a 7-year-old messenger, or that this child carried more than just money in that little glass jar. The boy had been watching her from the sandbox for 20 minutes before he made his decision. His name was Tyler, and his grandmother had brought him to the park like she did every Tuesday. But today was different. Today, he saw something in the crying lady that made his chest hurt in a way he couldn't explain. "My grandma says angels sometimes look sad," Tyler said softly, pushing the jar toward Sarah. "She says when we help them, they remember how to fly again." Sarah looked down at this child with untamed brown curls and eyes that seemed far too wise. "Sweetie, I can't take your money," she whispered, trying to hand the jar back. But Tyler's small hands pushed it firmly back toward her. "It's not just money," he said with the seriousness only children can muster. "It's wishes. Every coin is a wish for something good to happen. I was saving for a bike, but maybe you need the wishes more." His grandmother, an elderly woman with silver hair, stood a few feet away, watching with tears in her eyes, not intervening, as if she knew something profound was happening. What Sarah didn't know was that this grandmother had been praying for this moment for 7 long years. As Sarah held the jar, she noticed something that made her breath catch, a small photograph tucked behind the bills, visible through the glass. It showed Tyler as a baby, held by a younger woman who looked exhausted but radiant. "That's my real mom," Tyler said quietly. "Grandma says she went to heaven when I was born. But she saved me first." Sarah's hands began to shake. The date on the photo, the hospital bracelet visible on the woman's wrist, the familiar background of St. Mary's Medical Center. What was your mother's name?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "Jennifer Ross," Tyler replied. "Grandma says she was brave. She made sure I was okay even though she was sick." The name hit Sarah like lightning. Jennifer Ross, the woman in room 302. The night of her accident, she hadn't been the only trauma patient. There had been a young woman in labor, complications, decisions that had to be made. Sarah's memory of that night was fractured, but certain moments remained crystal clear. The pieces of an impossible puzzle were falling into place, and Tyler's grandmother was now walking closer, her face a map of recognition and destiny. "I know who you are," the grandmother said softly, reaching for Sarah's hand. "You're the woman who made it possible." Sarah's mind raced back to that horrible night 7 years ago. The accident had brought her to the same hospital where Jennifer Ross was dying from pregnancy complications. But before Sarah's surgery, in a brief moment of consciousness, she had done something that the medical staff called miraculous. She had given her rare blood type for an emergency transfusion. Not for herself, but for the young mother fighting to deliver her baby in the next room. The doctors had said Sarah wouldn't survive without it, but she had insisted, through the pain and confusion, that they save the mother and child first. "You gave my daughter your blood," the grandmother whispered. The doctor said it bought her just enough time to deliver Tyler safely. She lived long enough to hold him, to name him, to tell him she loved him. Because of you. Sarah's tears fell onto the jar of wishes. She had lost so much that night. Her husband, her career, her memories' reliability. But she had never known what her sacrifice had given to the world. Tyler wasn't just a random child offering help. He was the life she had saved, now standing before her with his entire savings, completing a circle that had begun in the darkest moment of both their stories. You saved me before you even knew me, Tyler said, his young voice filled with an understanding beyond his years. Grandma told me the story. She said an angel gave her blood so I could be born. I've been looking for angels ever since. Sarah pulled the boy into her arms, and he hugged her back with the fierce love that only children possess. The grandmother wrapped her arms around them both, and for a moment, the three of them stood there, connected by loss, sacrifice, and a love that transcended understanding. Your mother, Sarah whispered to Tyler. She would be so proud of who you're becoming. The grandmother pulled back, wiping her tears. We've been blessed, Sarah. My daughter's life insurance. We have more than enough. Tyler and I have been waiting, praying for the chance to give back. This isn't charity. It's balance being restored. She handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was a check that would not only stop the eviction but change everything. Jennifer appeared in my dreams last week, the grandmother said softly. She told me to come to this park on Tuesday. She said her angel needed us. Tyler looked up at Sarah with those wise eyes and smiled. Now you can remember how to fly again, he said. And somehow, in that moment, Sarah felt her broken wings beginning to heal. 3 months later, Sarah stood in her saved home, watching through the window as Tyler played in her backyard with Emma, who had become the big sister he'd never had. The grandmother, Margaret, had become family, filling the void of the mother Sarah had lost years ago. Her memory issues hadn't disappeared, but now she had a support system that understood her struggles. Tyler had gotten his bike. Sarah and Emma had surprised him with it on his 8th birthday. But he said the wishes had worked better than any bicycle ever could. He had wished for a bigger family, and somehow, through the mysterious mathematics of the universe, his 4327 had purchased something priceless. Sarah had started a foundation called Jennifer's Wishes, helping families affected by traumatic loss, funded by Margaret's generous donation and her own story of sacrifice and redemption. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the smallest hands, and the most profound healings arise from the most unexpected encounters. Tyler had given Sarah his life savings, but what he really gave her was the knowledge that her greatest loss had also been her greatest gift, and that every sacrifice made in love creates ripples that eventually return as waves of grace. Do you believe that the kindnesses we show in our darkest moments can return to save us when we need them most? Have you ever discovered that a random encounter was actually destiny completing a circle you didn't know existed? Or perhaps you've been the Tyler in someone's story, a small messenger carrying exactly what someone needed, at exactly the right moment. Share your story below, because sometimes the universe uses the most unexpected people to deliver its most important messages, and sometimes a child's jar of wishes is worth more than all the money in the world.